Okay, well, good evening and welcome everybody to another installment of our Rendezvous with Romance author event series in partnership with Avon Books. I am Amy. I'm a bookseller at Schuler Books in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And every month I get to chat with the authors of newly released romance titles from Avon Books. I'm a lifelong romance lover and enthusiast. Anybody who knows me knows it's just about all I like to talk about. So this is a dream gig for me to get to talk to some of the people who make the books that I love so much. Tonight's titles that we'll be talking about, along with many, many others, are available both in our stores and on our website. Go to schulerbooks.com or nicholasbooks.com and get some new reading for yourself for the summer. Great beach reads, romance novels. We also ship worldwide, so go on our websites, order. You can support an independent bookstore, and we will ship it right to your house. All right, so without further ado, I am going to introduce our guests tonight. First off, make sure I have all my paperwork here. Julie Ann Long is the author of You Were Made to Be Mine. This is the 5th installment in her charming Palace of Rogues series, in which a rakish spy finds more than he bargained for in his pursuit of an earl's enchanting runaway fiancée. Julie's books have been translated into 18 languages, nominated for numerous awards, have appeared on dozens of best of lists, and NPR named her Pennyroyal Green series one of the top 100 romance series of all time. She currently lives in Northern Carolina. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
All right, and then Megan Frampton is the author of 4 Weeks of Scandal. This is her newest historical romance. It's a delicious story about a will in dispute, a 4-week bargain, and a pretend engagement with romantic consequences. Megan writes historical romance under her own name, as well as romantic women's fiction under the name of Megan Caldwell. She likes the color black, gin, dark-haired British men, and huge earrings, not particularly in that order. And she lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and kid. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you. Here, I'll adjust my camera so I don't look so weird. Okay, there we go.
Thrilled to have you both. I finished both these within about 2 days because I can just eat them up. I would love to hear from each of you just a little bit more about your new release, where it falls, because they both are part of a series, and sort of where the inspiration came from. Julie, would you take it away?
Sure. See, I brought visual aids too.
Oh, good.
And it's the 5th book in my Palace of Rogues series. You Were Made to Be Mine is the 5th book in my Palace of Rogues series. And the Palace of Rogues series began with Lady Daring Takes a Lover. And it's a story of when a feckless earl dies and leaves his wife and his mistress, that the wife doesn't know about, destitute. And they form an unlikely alliance and friendship ultimately, and use Delilah, who is the countess. Her only inheritance is a tumbled down, run down building by the docks, and they turn it into a boarding house. So we have quite a vivid cast of characters coming into this boarding house by the docks, which include, icy dukes and scandalous opera singers, and a man named Mr. Delacourt who sells mysterious medicines. And if you've read this series, everyone's still trying to figure out Mr. Delacourt. And so it's been a blast to write this revolving cast of characters and setting these very rich romances within the context of this boarding house. And so You Were Made to Be Mine begins when a British spy master is released from prison, and he has been asked to find the runaway fiancée of a perfidious earl. And the catch is that Christian Hawkes, our spy master, thinks the earl is the one who had put him in prison and may have committed treason, and he was well on his way to proving it when he was arrested. And he's currently destitute because he had to forego his fortune in order to stay away from the firing squad. So he accepts the assignment, and he has to track Lady Aurélie Capet from where he is in London, from where he is in Paris, and they both wind up at the Grand Palace, on the Thames, the name of our boarding house. And along the way, he needs to solve the mystery of why she ran away and how he can prove that the Earl actually committed treason. So there's a good deal of drama. There's hidden passageways, there's stabbings, there's little evenings in the sitting room, there are trysts in houses in the country. So it's I would say it's very lively, it's funny, and it's profoundly emotional. A lot of people are saying that it's a very, very moving story of two people who have been quite hurt and have finding the courage to make a new life for themselves. And a reader described it to me as they're just two people looking for someone to whom to give their love. They're dying to do that.
Yeah.
So they do that.
Yes, it is a very emotional, the journeys that they both go on towards each other and together. It is very emotional.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, Megan, tell us a little bit more about the weeks.
So 4 Weeks of Scandal is the fifth, like Julie, is the fifth book in the Hazards of Dukes series. And in the first book in the series, I introduce a woman and her sister, younger sister, who had to decamp to London. Their dad gambled everything away and they end up owning a gambling house. So this book is actually the younger sister a few years later, who their father has died, and she believes that her father would have left the house to her, the only thing that he had left, right? She's made an unfortunate error of judgment in borrowing money from a moneylender that she can't pay back. And so she leaves London and goes to this house to claim it, to, basically flip it, right? And sell it for a lot of money and never leave London again after that. But when she walks in, her dog, an enormous dog named Cerberus, runs through and runs into a pond and finds, they both find, she and the dog is much less struck by it than she is, a naked man in the pond. And the naked man, who also has a dog, very small, believes he owns the house, because back in the first book, I'd had it that the older sister took the younger sister when their father tried to barter the younger sister's hand in marriage to this other gambler. So these two men have been gambling against each other a long time. Well, the guy who owns the house now is the son of the original gambler. So if things had worked out the way their parents had wanted it, they would have been married. But of course, things don't work out, thank God. So they both believe they have rights to the house, and they give each other a month to find out who really owns the house. Meanwhile, they have to come up with a story, because two people can't just live there and together, So they come up with a fake engagement. They start kind of accumulating people in the house, and there's lots of hijinks and looking at books and talking about Greek myth at night, because he's a scholar. So and I think for me, usually the first scene comes up, and I don't remember where I got the pond scene. I think it was from what's it called? Far from the Madding Crowd, I think, the movie with Matthias Schoenaerts and can't remember her name, the one that's married to the musician guy. Anyway, it's Thomas Hardy. Anyway,
Oh, geez.
yeah, I know Thomas Hardy, right? Bucket of laughs, right? No. Happy ending, but so usually what happens is I get the first scene in my head. I have the image of the hero in my head, because I usually base them on real people, and this guy looks exactly like Matthias Schoenaerts, who I love him. He's a very good actor, but he's also incredibly good looking. So so that's that. This will be the last book in this series.
Okay.
I'm starting a new series, comes out in January, I think, another new series. But this one was really fun because I wrote it almost entirely set in the country. Nobody has a title. well, of the main characters, nobody has a title. There's a couple of titles floating around somewhere else. And so I didn't actually deal with the tone and balls and fancy dresses. She comes there wearing one gown and, you know, packed a couple others hastily. I also wrote what a lot of people have said, and I agree, is an unlikable heroine from the beginning, because she is impetuous, stubborn, pig-headed. Well, I guess that's the same way as stubborn. Anyway, and I hoped, and if I didn't persuade readers by the end, then I failed at my job, but I hope to show her growth as she comes to understand that her way is not the only way. And he's kind of just he's a classic cinnamon roll hero, and he's just gone for her probably as soon as he met her, but you know, I don't reveal that until later. You kind of figure it out. So.
Sure.
And then the dogs like each other too, so that's a bonus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dogs always help. It's
Yeah.
one of the myths that he retells in the evening story times is the Hades and Persephone myth, which you know has gotten a lot of treatment recently in different modern retellings. And this one ends up almost being sort of a reverse Hades and Persephone. And so she's the sort of the one that you don't necessarily like, and he's the one that you have a little bit more sympathy for at the beginning until they sort of grow together and find their way.
Actually, the working title for this one, because I always have was Persephone. So I like it. Yeah, that's because I was basing it on that when I realized I could flip the myth. Very, very, you know, it's very loosely based. I'm not, you know, and then Katie Robert came out with her book, and I was like, oh crap, but there's nothing similar about them.
Yeah,
so
no,
it's
they're
okay.
very different.
Yeah. Very different. Yeah.
Both wonderful, very different.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So one of the things you talked both a little bit about your writing process, one of the tropes that's present, and you've both talked about a little bit, is the found family that exists in both of these stories. And they're built built differently. Found family is a trope that isn't romance specific. You find it in a lot of different genres. I know there's a lot of fantasy that really relies heavily on the found family. So I'd love to know sort of where some of those characters came from. You know, Megan's, yours, they were all built up in this one novel, whereas Julie's, you've sort of been adding people along over 5 books, but they all still show up for each other, and just that sense of loyalty. That's the reason why it's one of my favorite tropes, is it just feels like a big hug. All these people sort of coming together to help each other when you think that all is lost. So I'd love to know sort of where the inspirations came from for some of the side characters that really do become, you know, main characters in the story. I think Julie, Dot is probably one of the most memorable non-main characters in a romance novel that I can think of. And I would love to know if she's going to get her own happy ever after, even in like a novella. I would love to just see her.
It's difficult. Everyone's rooting for Dot and Mr. Delacourt, not necessarily together, but I'm like, so do you really want to see Mr. Delacourt in a love scene? I mean, I could do it. I'd happily do that, but I mean, think this through. But I love writing Dot. She's a delight. She's just, and because I think she has hidden depths, and she also is imaginative, and she just thinks on a different plane from everybody else, and it doesn't make her less intelligent, and it doesn't make her less astute, but she just experiences the world in this very vivid Dot-esque way. And it's really fun to get into her head and write her lines and write how she surprises them and grows. But I think a lot of when I write up people like that, I think of Wodehouse, you know, some of the funniest physical comedy and situational comedy I've ever read. And so that's kind of my inspiration. It's kind of that's kind of the music I get in my head that I want to dance to as I write, if that makes sense. It's like the inspiration. I want someone that funny and that physical. And I mean, she has some spiritual kind of forebears, a little bit of Phoebe Buffet, a little bit of, did you watch The Vicar of Dibley?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Alice from Vicar of Dibley, a little bit of that, but she's very much her own thing. She sort of takes, when I'm writing her, she sort of is becomes I'm not channeling it per se, but she becomes, I'm just in her head, and it's fun to write her lines. They become automatic and pretty easy once it gets going. But that's part of the fun, because you can, when you introduce a cast of characters like that, you sort of increase your romantic possibilities too, because in experiencing these various characters, like in You Were Made to Be Mine, I wanted to show the marriages of people, and it was like our character Orly was getting a perspective on love that she didn't. She had some assumptions about what love was like, and she was horribly wrong, and as a consequence was horribly injured or experienced some heartbreak. And so she's there and she's witnessing what a dynamic of a happy marriage looks like, so you get to show in these kinds of contexts love from all angles. So it's not just romantic, it's a love story in a lot of sense of the words, in every sense of the word, I should say. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
But I think that's the one of the joys of writing a big cast. And it's, for me, it's like, who's going to be at that door? And that's why Dot loves to open that door, because people like to be surprised. I want to be surprised when I'm reading. And I think that's the joy of it too, because surprise is, there's inspiration in surprise.
And what about you, Megan?
So for me, I grew up, this isn't going to be a sad story, I promise, but it sort of starts out a little sad. I grew up, my parents got separated / divorced, whatever, when I was 13. And I stayed with my dad, which back then was unusual, but my mom made it clear that she really wanted, to be away from everything. So I stayed with my dad. And my dad was was a journalist and very good at talking to people. And we lived in a pretty big apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he kind of started accumulating people. So through the years, we had a variety of people like living in our house at any time. It was me and him always, as I grew up and everything. But then we just had all these people. And then I had my friends, my high school friends, some of whom I'm still friends with now, like 40 years later, that became the people I depended on rather than my mom and I didn't really, my parents both were kind of isolated from their respective families. So for me, making sure to have like really close friendships and supportive community, it resonates with my soul and the way that I feel like I hope that I do with my friends now, or with my, with other romance authors. And that's why, for example, I'm always on Twitter recommending books, because I feel like that's just kind of like broadening all the connections. And if we all come together, I mean, it's even more than just blood, because you have to sort of like somebody you're related to. You don't have to like people that you're not related to. So the fact that you do is really impressive, I think, says the introvert. But but so I really like, I've discovered I really like family. And I've been told that I write sibling relationships great, which is great. I don't have a sibling. So I think I just kind of projected what it would be like if I had one, and how cool it would be, and whatever. So as I've written more and more books, that's becoming more embedded in what I do, is found family.
I was going to say too, that what you mentioned, when you don't have to like the people you're with, I think that presents a delicious possibility in a sort of a boarding house context, because you're forced to be together as part of the rules. And so you have to find that commonality to be together. And that's really fun, finding those little areas of friction and finding the areas of diplomacy and commonality.
Yeah, as each new person comes into the Grand Palace and spends their first night in the sitting room, sort of figuring out, is that going to offend somebody, or is that not going to offend somebody, and recognizing all those bonds that are there and the way they can fit in is very comforting and helps them feel settled.
And it's fun to throw little monkey wrenches in there too. So
Yes. So I've talked in previous episodes of this about how the romance genre, there's a lot of variety in the romance genre, but there are two elements that are required to make it a genre romance, not just a story with romance included. And that's that the romantic relationship is central to the storyline. It's not secondary. And then it does have to have some sort of resolved happy ending, whether it's happy for now or happily ever after. But they can't be in love and then one character dies at the end. That's no longer a romance. That is, if that happens when I pick up a book from the romance section, I feel betrayed.
Right.
That's not what I'm in this for. I have found my reading habits, especially in the last couple of years, I really, really struggle to pick up something from other genres where I don't know that it's going to resolve okay. I can read through all sorts of stuff, but if I don't know that it's going to resolve, I've never been a read the last chapter kind of person, but I'm getting to that point because I just need to know, like, it's going to be okay in the end. Like, it's going to be okay. And that's why I love romance, because I can get all this variety. I can get fantasy, I can get mystery, I can get whatever. And still know that it's going to be okay at the end. So I'm curious what each of you like best about writing for the romance genre, and maybe what you find to be the most challenging part about writing for the romance genre. And maybe it's not related to romance at all. Maybe it's just what you find easiest and most challenging about writing in general. But
Julie, you can go. Unless you don't want to.
I mean, there are a million ways to answer that question, I think, and because you could, from a perspective of writing, I feel like we were talking earlier before we went live about how not everybody understands that the romance genre is vast, and there are vast possibilities for within this little construct of happily ever after. There are infinite possibilities. And I like to think of it as kind of like a sonnet. You have 14 lines and it has its limitations, but also within that, there's just like, you can do amazing things, right? But it's just incredibly satisfying to put two characters that you've created through their emotional paces. And I think that's part of it. I think that we as humans like to empathize with other humans, and we want to see everything turn out okay with them. And it never gets old. It's a human story. I mean, even if it's the same story that's been told over and over, we're interested in it because it's another human. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like an analogy I used once, because I was sitting on the bus and a woman, and there were two women sitting in front of me having a conversation, and one of them says, that guy I told you about that I had a crush on in college? And she's like, yeah. She's like, well, he showed up. He's the new hire. And, and instantly I'm like, it's not a brand new story, but just because we're human, we want to know how that story ends. And we want to live it with them, and we want to see the happy ending. So I think that's it. It is super challenging to make it fresh and original and vibrant and tight and get it to that happy ending that feels appropriate to our couple. So I think I like that. I think that's a delicious challenge too. So
what's the hardest part for you then about writing? Like Amy said, whatever in your process and stuff.
Well, like you and I were talking via email, but all the books are different. They are conceived differently. For me, the ideas pop in differently, and the process for each one, whether it flows smoothly where you sort of sense the structure already, or whether you're just sort of feeling your way in the dark, and I do that quite a bit. They're all different, and in the end, readers don't know the difference between them. I've learned that they don't know which ones fight you and which ones are easy. But I want to say it's never easy, but it is fun and delicious. I mean, do you ever find it easy? Because we're burning a certain amount of emotional fuel to get there, and to choose the right words and be in the scene and feel the right feelings. So that's intense, but
for me, there are times, during the writing of a book where I enter what I call the fugue state, where an hour passes and I've written 1,000 words. I have no idea what they are, and they work. And
Yeah.
it's awesome when that happens. And usually it's tied to the sex scenes, because I feel as though a lot of my character development happens through the sex scenes. Like, you can't skip the sex scenes in my book because people are being vulnerable or whatever.
Right.
So those times are magical. It's not happening with this book that I'm writing now, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Maybe with the next one. And I guess to segue back over about the satisfaction of writing romance, what I really like about it is, Julie, the sonnet thing is perfect, because we all know there's a meet cute or meet uncute or whatever, right? There's an introduction, there's a gradual, like, getting to know you, difficulties in the way, conflicts, blah, blah, blah. Breaking, little breaking points through the way. I used to think of it like a clothesline where you kind of hang everything up. So introduction, blah, blah, blah. And that's how I think of it in my head when I'm not that I plot, but I know the beats I have to hit. And then you have the, no, not at all a plotter. No, I just actually, it's boring if I plot. And whenever I write a synopsis,
That's how
I immediately veer from it once I'm like, oh, wait, look what happened here. That's so cool. But anyway, which actually is really ridiculous since I'm the one writing it. But so yes, you've got all those beats and you know what's going to happen, but you have no idea how it's going to happen. How,
Right.
like, how are these people going to get out of this mess? What are their core issues that the other person's going to test? And so, yeah, what's the worst thing that this person could do to them, and then make that happen. Now, I write really fluffy and light, but I do try to make it so that the characters, if you were to ask them, because of course they're going to pop right in my house, they would say, yeah, I'm really suffering. Although the books are so light and fluffy, in, even the dark moments, I think, are funny, I hope. But they do feel resonant. And so I like that, putting them through the sonnets in a different way each time.
Yeah, I think you nailed what's fun about it, because like you said, there are beats we have to hit, and there is a structure to our plot typically, but even if you think you know where you're going and how you're going to do it, you encounter surprises constantly. Characters surprise you, and the story surprises you. So it's really super fun. It's a great way to make a living.
Yeah.
And spend your free time.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you have to find that breaking point of, like, what could they do that would be so much that it breaks them apart, but that it would be believable that it could be forgiven and resolved. I mean, I think that it's easy to think of things they could do to hurt the other person so much, but it has to be believable within their character development that they would be able to come back together from that, and that it would be forgivable, and that it could be resolved somehow. And I think that's a really fine line between making it a bad enough thing or a hard enough thing, but also believable that it could be resolved by the end of the story.
Yeah.
And
that's why go ahead, Julie. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's not easy, and it's a delicious challenge, but not easy. So
I admire authors that can do it really, like that super, super black moment where you're like, like some of Sarah McLean's books have that.
Yes.
And I'm like, how the hell is she going to recover from this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or, and a lot of the current, like, sort of intense contemporary stuff out there now, like there's some really tangible, like, whatever pressure points between the characters, and I don't know how they're going to do it. And of course I'm sitting there, flipping away. So, and I cut you off, Julie, I'm sorry.
No, I just said what I had to say.
All right.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the historical setting, because you both write historicals, and how that sort of affects the plotting or the storyline. maybe how you decided to write in the time period that you did, and then how that helps to shape or impacts the story that you're writing.
Probably
who do you want?
Jane Austen, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and also like if she were writing story, I always say if she was writing a story about the Incas, because her voice was so vivid, we'd have Inca romances instead of Regency romances, today or something like that. But also I grew up in a house full of every kind of book you can imagine, like every book. We had tons of historical, and my mom hid the historical romances in her nightstand drawer. We had Wallace Stegner and Rosemary Rogers, and I mean, just like everything out there, and I loved them all, and I'm like, when I thought about writing a book, I'm like, it's going to be fun. I know the story. I want to write a book that is a vivid romp and it includes all these characters that get to fall in love. So that was the question. And but it was, I think that that it's a big part of it. We can blame Jane Austen for that, for making it look so delightful. And but it's fun because what's interesting is that you have built-in strictures.
Yes.
We have, and so it's in structuring the friction that comes with a plot between hero and heroine and the characters in it, the class system, and the glamour, I guess, of titled and the aristocracy is kind of interesting to explore. The underside of London, which is absolutely fascinating, and I explored it a little bit, particularly in like my first book in Pennyroyal Green, where we have our hero going to the gallows, and that was, so there's such a just vast amount of history to call upon when you're structuring a story. So yeah, I think that's it. What about you, Megan?
For me, I really like, I think what you referenced a little bit, like the limitations of writing historical romance. Like when I like that you can't have the hero and heroine alone together without like coming up with some banana pants way to make that happen. And I like doing that. And for me, I started reading romance when I was about 10 or 11. And I started every week I lived in a tiny town in New Hampshire back then, town of about 1,000 people, which is bonkers. But I'd go to the local store and spend my allowance on Barbara Cartland novels. And I know now that she was plagiarizing Georgette Hare, but whatever. At the time, it was wonderful. And reading about these worlds where people wore gorgeous gowns, and I love fashion. I just love looking at fashion. And so the idea of like, it's later than my time period, but getting to be dressed by Charles Frederick Worth is like, oh my God, and all that sort of stuff. So I like Julie said, kind of the glamour, right? If you said that, I forget who, but and I do like the limitations of it. If I were writing contemporary, that's not a world I really want to live in. Like now is just that's not my jam, right? I mean, I just much prefer historicals. And I started when I was young, also like watching Greer Garson and Laurence Olivier in Pride and Prejudice, and watched that over and over again, and watched and read Pride and Prejudice over and over again. Like Julie, I grew up in a house full of books. Unlike Julie, nobody censored me. I was raised by wolves, but what's that?
Well, we weren't allowed to read because we ended up with questions like, "Mommy, what's a manhood?" And she wasn't prepared to answer that necessarily. So everything else, that was the 70s back then. It was like Richard Bach and everything on the shelves so everything was fair game except for the
Yeah, really my mom wasn't very good at hiding anything, so I read all of them. So and then actually I stopped reading romance when I went to college, not because I was like above it, but because in the late I went to college in 82. So that's, books, historical romances were pretty rapey then. And so I stopped reading them for a long, long time and picked them up again when I had a kid who's now going to turn 23 next month. And I only had one hand because I was breastfeeding. So I had to read mass market. So that's how I came back to romance. And of course I went back and I actually found Amanda Quick. And I was like, holy hell, this is amazing. This is so cool. And I hadn't read it. Yeah, I hadn't read it in romance in like 20 years, but I came back to it and it felt comforting and natural. And I was a new mom and freaked the hell out. And, my husband was working all the time and I was home and I was reading and I wanted that to go back to that, knowing that everything would be okay by the end.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say about historicals too is that I feel like it really transports you more than a contemporary does. Like if you want real escapism, if you want to be taken completely out of your world, I think that's part of what draws me to it too. And I think readers like, it's just a very different world in the way that a fantasy world is, even though it's historically based.
Yeah, that's actually why I like reading. In addition, I read like a lot of fantasy, whether or not it's fantasy romance or not. I read a lot of fantasy. I like to read historical mysteries and anything that is out of this world. I don't really like reading contemporaries. I will, because there's romance, because of course I'm going to read romance and I'm going to read great writing no matter where it is. But it's my least favorite flavor of romance because I'm like, oh, well, who's, when they yank the tablecloth off and go have sex on the table, I'm like, who's going to clean that up now? It's just, but in a historical, you don't like,
the servants clean.
Yeah, you don't have servants in the house for that.
Right.
It's already built.
Whereas I'm forcing my lens of my reality through too much when I'm reading contemporaries. And contemporaries now are people that are a good 30 years younger than me too. And so that's interesting to look at, people that are my daughter's age, right? So, and I can't connect to them because, I'm really secretly still just 14 years old and reading whatever I want to, but it is different. And I don't enjoy it as much because I'm not transported, like Julie said.
Yeah, I've had conversations with coworkers who actually just they've only recently started reading romance or they only read contemporary. And I've struggled to try to find a way to explain, like, what does the historical, why is that sort of my preference? But I think you nailed it exactly right, Megan. It's more transporting than reading something that takes place now that references anything current. When I'm reading romance, I don't want to think about current events at all. That's why I'm trying to escape. So that's
yeah.
All right. So on the topic of when I'm talking to my coworkers about romance, something that comes up a lot is some of the terminology, especially in the titles, about titles like dukes and earls and barons and things like that. And then also the other titles that they are given, like rake and scoundrel and rogue. When I was putting together a display, I wanted titles from the peerage in the title of the book. And so pulling them out, and someone brought me over some that said, the rake who loved me, or the something, something, something. Those are not the same thing. And then they also thought that the, dukes and earls and things like that are royalty. And so that's all just part of the royalty. And I was trying to explain also, how the peerage is different than the monarchy. So would one of you, and I don't think I explained it very well other than saying they're not the same. Would one of you like to talk about sort of the difference between the monarchy and the peerage system and where all those titles, official titles, come from?
Well, so one thing I always say is I write a lot of dukes, or I used to write a lot. I'm off dukes right now because I got burnt out on dukes. One thing I like to make comparable is dukes are like the CEO of historical period because they're not waiting for anyone to die, unlike the monarchy. Because unless you're writing about a king, you're just sitting around waiting for someone to die. The duke is like I said, CEO. Like he's got vast holdings, he's got tons of money, he's got tons of power. He wields it as he sees fit, whether he is fit or not, whatever, that happens. But it feels to me like royalty. I don't, and then you have to worry about like leading a country and all that, like that appeals to me not at all. Whereas making someone titled kind of gives you that class thing that Julie had mentioned before, and then you compare them with, I like doing the where the power balance meets. So like I've got a duke and a governess, she's going to have to be the one to make the first move or whatever. And I like playing with all that power dynamic stuff.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
CEO, because I hadn't quite looked at it that way, but you're exactly right. And I had never considered, but you're right, but there is less latitude when you're writing royalty, especially in that time period. So the story possibilities are fewer. And I mean, there's still aristocracy and there's still landed gentry and all of that stuff. But even between marquises and dukes and earls, there's the subtlety of the gradations of power and all the little ways that you have to move in society. I write one of my first series was a pair of families who were extremely wealthy, but they're not titled. And so what's interesting is that gives them something to strive for. They're very powerful, but there's just that one thing that's like missing, that one element of competition. They don't have it.
I always, when I think about that, what you were just saying about like the subtleties of things, I think about in Persuasion, where is it Mr. Elliot, right? Anne Elliot's dad is like, she's a viscountess, like in the Kieran Hines, Amanda Root version of the movie, where you've got that amazing like pompous dude who's the Debrett's opens up to his thing because he's read it so many times, and yet he's still like, he thinks he's all that, but he also is still awed by the fact that they're distantly related to this viscountess who's not very pleasant, honestly, but he doesn't see it. Well, he's also not very pleasant, so there you go.
But so then on the other hand is the other titles that are given of rake and rogue and scoundrel. What is a rake in historical, and how does it differ from a rogue or a scoundrel, if it does at all?
Do you want to take this, Julie? You want? Yeah,
no, go for it. I mean, I think we're in synonym territory, though. It's like what sounds best on the cover, but for, for the nuts. But I think that we're drawn to that bad boy, right? And then we want to find out, because we know by the end, the scoundrel, this rake, this rogue, is going to be somewhat reformed and or tamed, and or will go through a journey, and we're fascinated by that journey, I think.
And I think for me, rakes are more sexually, they're promiscuous. Rogues are more charming and are more likely to hoodwink you, and scoundrels are kind of both.
Okay,
like they're and
that's a good one.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll say caveat that I have very rarely, I don't think I've ever written an alpha hero who's been like a super, I just can't seem to do it. I'm just not personally able to fathom that kind of arrogance. I wrote one time, it was kind of it was on the autism spectrum. In my head, I believed he was. So he was a real, I shouldn't swear. He was a jerk. But that was the closest I came to writing one of those, and he was not rakish at all. He was just very cold and jerky. So.
Yeah, I say rogues are more playful. You think of more, and then the rakes, like you said, is a little bit of a player, much more of a player. And scoundrels would be maybe the gaming hell owner, or I mean,
Yeah.
or something like that.
They're somehow duplicitous, I think. And no matter what usually they have a good reason for being like that, but they're wilier, I think, a lot of times,
Yeah.
scoundrels. So.
There's going to be a little bit of a swindle in there somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, since we have our vocabulary word brains on, I have Mad Libs After Dark, which is all romance themed Mad Libs. And we're going to write a little story together tonight. So I'm sure that you are both familiar with Mad Libs, but for those who may not be, I have a story framework here and some words have been taken out, and I'm going to ask for volunteered words from Julie and Megan, just giving them the part of speech. Then they have to come up with whatever strikes their fancy, and it can be historical romance related or just a word that you like to use. And then once I have them all, we'll put them into the story and we'll have a funny romantic story to read and share. All right. So
do this with time with deadlines.
What's
I was
that?
telling, I was thinking, don't you wish we could do our deadlines this way?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Story. Crowdsource the story. Okay.
Great. Hey guys, I need a name and I've got a place and I need a conflict. Let's go.
Yeah.
All right. So first off, I need a noun. Megan, will you give me a noun?
Perpetuity.
Perpetuity. Gotta get that in there. Julie, can I have an adjective?
Slippery.
Megan, a plural noun.
Hijinks. This is actually how I write. The words just like.
All right, Julie, a part of the body.
Oh. Does it have to have a single word? Pinky toe.
Pinky toe. All right, Megan, another plural noun.
Plural noun. Staircases.
Julie, an adjective.
Exquisite.
Ooh. I love that word.
Megan,
Any
another
excuse.
adjective.
Another adjective? Supine.
Love it.
All right, Julie, a noun.
Elephant. Now we're getting into
Megan, an adverb. Oh, something I really try not to write. Happily.
All right, Julie, a place.
What is it?
A place.
A place. Back porch.
All right, Megan, an adjective.
Wondrous. Is that an adjective? That is, right? Wondrous.
Yeah. Okay. Julie, a noun.
Now I'm blank. I don't know any words at all. Fuzzy. No, that's not. No, that's not a noun.
Fuzz? You could do fuzz.
Fuzz.
All right. An article of clothing, plural.
Pantaloons.
All right. And a part of the body, plural.
Boobs. Someone had to say it.
All right. A verb ending in ing.
Oh, a gerund, you mean? But yes. No, wait, sorry. Mocking.
That's good.
An adjective.
Wiley.
A plural noun.
Handshakes.
All right, a noun.
Leather.
An adjective.
Dominant.
Another adjective.
Oh, bovine.
All right, last one for each of you. Megan, a part of the body.
Manhood.
I mean, we've got
No,
boobs. We've got to have
Right?
manhood.
Gotta have manhood.
All right, and a
Any more?
plural noun.
Sirens.
All right, we are ready for our story, the title of which is Romantic Men. What type of leading perpetuity gets you all hot and slippery? Do you prefer brains over hijinks? Do you like a scruffy pinky toe versus a clean shaven look? So many staircases, so little time. Let's look at what's on the exquisite menu. First, the supine professional who wears a three-piece elephant and strides happily through the streets of the back porch, ready to close the next wondrous deal. Or we have the blue-collar fuzz who knocks around in jeans, boots, and flannel pantaloons and can fix or build anything with his own two boobs. Third, we have the intellectual mocking man who contemplates wily questions like, why are we here? And what is the meaning of handshakes? And finally, the artistic leather who is quiet, sensitive, and dominant. He has a creative manhood and can see the beauty in everything from a bovine flower garden to a pile of rotting sirens.
Oh, that's very fun.
I told you it was a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece. Well,
Yep.
I'm sure that a publisher will be picking it up soon.
Yes.
Maybe even Avon will just,
Yeah, they're all on the phone right
Yeah.
now.
yeah, it's coming through right now. All right, we've got just a few minutes left here. I would love to know what you are each currently reading or most excited to read soon. Julie, what are you reading?
I usually read a bunch of things at a time,
Mhm.
which depending upon the mood. And I am starting Ellie Griffith's Locked Rooms. I love her series. I read a lot of things that are romance adjacent while I'm writing.
Mhm.
So Harry Nelson, you know the series. You're
Mhm.
a bookseller, you know the series.
Mhm.
So also I've got Lorraine Heath's which one was it? The Duchess Hunt,
Yeah.
that I'm dying
yeah.
to read because I've heard some wonderful things about it, and I love her books.
Yes.
And there's one by Piper Hughley that I picked up that
Oh,
was
yeah.
by her design. Like
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
read a few pages of it, and I love the voice, and so and the topic. You like fashion, so it's something.
Yeah,
that might
I
be
bought that too. Yeah.
Mhm.
So quite a few others, but I'll just stop with those three.
Sure. What about you, Megan?
Well, I'm reading Julie's book.
Mhm.
I'm also reading, because I listened to Fated Mates podcast today. I started reading Kerrigan Burns' The Highwaymen because they were
Okay.
raving about it. In audio, because I do a lot of long walks and listen to audiobooks. I'm listening to Sherry Thomas's Murder on Cold Street, which is part of the Charlotte Holmes series,
Yes.
historical mystery. And I have, and I'm also reading, and I don't know how to say her name, and I call it, or their name. It's NGHI, Vo, and it's
Mhm.
called Siren Queen, and
Mhm.
it's fantasy set in like 1920s Hollywood with a Chinese heroine
Yes.
who's
Great.
doing magical things to become a star. Yeah, and I'll stop there. I bought several
I've done
books
a lot of
today.
lists.
Yeah,
Mm.
a lot of lists. The cover is amazing.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, I'm shallow enough to say that I like a good cover. So
Sure. Yep.
I picked that up, and her writing is gorgeous. It's like shimmery, like glass. It just kind of flows. It's just so beautiful. So
That sounds
I don't know where
awesome.
it's
What is your
going.
name again?
Her name is NGHI, last name VO, and it's called Siren Queen.
All right.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, that one just came out this month, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
The
I
last
just saw it was recent. And it just showed up actually on like a list of the top books for the year so far, and I'm like, oh yeah, right, I'm reading that one. And
Mhm.
but because it's not romance, I do have to force myself to, like, which sounds ridiculous because good writing is good writing, right? But I don't know how it's going to end up, so I'm a little bit more trepidatious when I go into reading stuff like that, because people can die. I
Yeah.
don't like that.
Yeah.
Although I do read mysteries, so people die.
But you know that at the end of that, someone's going to
They're gonna
solve
solve
the
it.
murder.
Yeah, there's going to be a
Right.
resolution. Yeah,
Right.
and I like resolutions. So whether I'm reading noir mysteries or fantasy series where there's a huge long quest or something, I just like the resolution. So,
Sure.
and I don't know if this has a resolution, that book. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
What
Well,
are you reading, Amy?
I have I'm currently listening to Dead Romantics, which I've seen in a couple of different, it's a ghost love story. So it's the main character is a ghostwriter for a big romance name. And she has a new editor who is very easy to look at, but is very harsh and wants her to meet the deadline for the book. And she ends up going home for her father's funeral. They run a funeral home, but she also has the ability to see ghosts. And while she's there, the ghost of this editor shows up. And so they have to figure that out. So I am fascinated because it is a romance. I'm fascinated at how they are going to resolve this if he is a ghost. But it has blurbs from like Allie Hazelwood and Christina Lauren and several others that I really like their work, so I'm gonna trust them on this. And then I just got in the mail the arc for the next Beverly Jenkins.
Oh, that cover is beautiful.
It's
My
so
Lord.
pretty. It's so
Yeah.
pretty. To Catch a Raven, I think is what it's
Yeah.
called.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm talking to her in August along with Sarah
Oh,
McClay
great.
and several
Oh,
others.
cool.
So Heartstopper is also on my list.
I read that one.
Heartbreaker. Yep.
Yeah, I got to read that one. The heroine's last name is Frampton,
Mm-hmm.
after me. So
Yep. So
I had nothing to do with it beyond
Bombshell was
giving her
one
my
of
name.
my top reads and top recommends
Yeah.
of last year. I just absolutely, I mean, I love all
She
of
just
her.
keeps getting better and better.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yep. It's pretty fantastic. And then I'm also reading a general fiction called The Change, which is about three women who basically are at menopausal age and develop magical powers and are solving a series of murders of young women together with their magical post-menopausal powers. It felt very fitting for right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
a
that
lot-
does sound
there's
great.
A lot of rage in that one. It's by Kirsten Miller.
Who is it? Kirsten Miller?
Kirsten Miller. It's called The Change. It's got a beautiful purple cover.
Yeah, that sounds really great. I have to look that up too.
Yeah. I can only go a little. I read a few chapters at a time, and then I kind of have to go and listen to something a little fluffier because there is a lot of rage. But it's good.
Sounds great.
Yeah. What is coming up next? What can we look for next from each of you? Julie?
I have committed to write at least 3 more Palace of Rogues series books. Yay!
Oh, wow.
So, and I have a title for the next one, but I don't want to reveal it quite yet.
Mhm.
So that'll be out next year. And so
Is
I'll
it
be
with
busy
a
for a while.
character? Is it with a character that we already know, or is it a new?
There, I mean, well, we're gonna see all our same cast of characters in the
Okay.
Palace of Rose, but these are new people.
Okay.
So
So it's
but
not
those
Doc,
are
is what you're telling me. Is
No.
it's not quite Doc story
not
yet.
yet. No, I'll have to really think hard
Connected.
about her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next for you, Megan?
So the next book I have out, I think comes out end of January. It's called Her Lessons in Persuasion. It's the first book in a new series, The School for Scoundrels. Speaking of scoundrels.
Yes.
And it's there are 5 guys who all met in an orphanage, and they're all bastards. And they have a whole like found family, and they actually have, which I think I got inspired through Twitter when I was tossing ideas out. They do a book club every month. They get together and read a book, and they always read female authors, although I haven't pointed that out in the book. But if you, I mean, that's not a big part of it, but so it's each one of them, and they're all, you know, various types of
It's like a historical romance book club.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Love it.
So I'm
That's
writing the second book in that series, which is the one that is just giving me agita, because I am doing a kind of a forbidden romance. It's much older heroine, younger man, and then complicated relationships between everybody. That's a little tricky to navigate. I don't think I'm as good a writer as I would like to be to get to navigate that, but I'm just muddling through, and we'll see what happens.
And
You'll get it.
It'll come out the other side.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. This has been a real joy. I really enjoyed talking to both of you, and I of course
thank
enjoy
you.
reading your books and look forward to many more. Again, both books, You Were Made to Be Mine and 4 Weeks of Scandal, are available at Schuler Books. We have them on the shelf right now in Grand Rapids and in Okemos at Nicholas Books. They're also available on our websites, Schuler Books and nicholasbooks.com. And again, we ship worldwide. So if anything we talked about tonight sounded interesting, reach out and place an order. Thank you again also to Avon Books for reaching out and for partnering with us. It is such a joy to work at a bookstore that promotes romance, but then also to get to promote it a little bit wider and broader. Next month on July 28th, I'll be doing a Rendezvous with Romance, and I would be talking about dukes and duchesses. So we'll be talking more peerage with Sheris Michaels and Lorraine Heath. So very excited about that. Tune in July 28th. And between now and then, find some happy endings, some romances. Again, thank you both. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Stay well, be safe, take care.
Thank you. And thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure,
Thanks.
sure. Good night.
Bye. Night.
Night.